Greetings, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. I'm Cipher, and this is the Devil's Advocate Debate Club. Welcome back. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about Trump's proposed changes to immigration, specifically the naturalized birth law, which states that anyone born in the United States is a citizen, being under United States jurisdiction at the time of their birth. This is actually part of the 14th Amendment of the United States, and thus would be, very difficult to make any changes to, for the most part. So, let's look into this at two levels. First, is this really an idea worth thinking about? Are there merits to this idea? I know most people on Twitter and a lot of people in general think that all of Trump's ideas are wrong, maybe simply because they come from him. Personally, I'm a little bit more moderate on the issue, taking extreme concern with some things Trump does and liking others. There's a back and forth on every politician, but into that later. So let's start with the merits of the proposed change to our legal code. What are the problems faced with letting people born in America become citizens? Well, for one thing, this leaves us with two options of what to do with the parents who are in most situations that we would be worrying about illegal immigrants. See, I don't think that there should be any change in the citizens or legal residents of America gaining citizenship if they are born in America. But I don't think that's what Trump is proposing. The interesting question for me, and I think the most important question before I could decide whether or not to support it, is whether or not this would extend to legal immigrants who are, citizens, as long as it's not infringing on the right of any of our citizens, immigrants or otherwise, and is simply preventing illegal immigrants from, leveraging our country by having a baby here, I might have to support it, because if we keep the policy as is, when illegal immigrants have a baby here, we have two options. We can either take the baby from them, removing the baby from its natural parents, and basically placing it under the ownership and protection of the United States government, which is horrible for so many reasons. I don't think I have to go into them. I think one or two will come to the minds of almost everyone on either side of the political spread as to why that's not really an acceptable solution to this problem. The other is for, granting the parents some sort of protection. And in many cases, let's just be honest, if they're immigrating here for better financial climate or whatever situation, a lot of these people really don't have much. They're, poor. Nothing to hold against them except that we cannot take in all of the world's poor, and a lot of them seem intent to come here. So if a baby born here is an American citizen just because its parents made it across the border, this puts us at financial risk for either the baby, or if we're kinder and if we're being just more honest with what human society will allow as far as our social ethics, we're much more likely to have an even greater expense of taking care of the baby and, to a degree or another, its family. Now, I know a lot of people like to argue that immigrants are a boon to the economy, and this is correct. Legal immigrants are. This is why I'm talking about illegal immigrants, which a lot of people like to conflate these days. And it's not actually just on the left. I've seen it on both sides, so I'm not going to call out one side or the other on this issue. However, illegal immigrants are simply statistically not a financial boon to our country. They're a detriment. And this doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at changing our immigration policy to make it easier to get in legally or things like that, but, well, letting them stay and financing them just because they managed to have a kid here and it's a citizen isn't necessarily a good idea. This also, as a lot of people have talked about, incentivizes people to make the dangerous journey through, well, dangerous parts of Mexico where cartels are held, and just dangerous regions of the world in general in order to get to America's borders at times while pregnant. And this just isn't a good solution for the families making this trip. They're being led to believe in many ways that it is, and it really, for the most part, just isn't worth the number of, in my opinion at least, lives that we've seen lost and kidnappings. And I mean, this will probably get me flagged by YouTube's algorithms, but rapes is one of the big problems that they face while coming through, especially the northern parts of Mexico where cartels hold a lot of power. These are things that aren't easy to talk about, I think, for anyone, and they're not easy for me to talk about, but it's important not to pull punches when dealing with serious issues, and I really try not to here. So, while there are certainly arguments against it from a globalist, socialist, or I would say extremist humanitarian position, or for, no borders advocates, I guess they fall into the globalist category to a degree. Outside of those rather well-known arguments, which I don't feel hold too much water, I think there's definitely an argument for it being beneficial to our country to change the policy on birthright citizenship. Now, I think it should be very clear that it should only be changed for illegal immigrants, not for legal immigrants, citizens, or other nationalized people. But I, A, think this is Trump's plan, and B, think that it is, if not the only way, it's possible, certainly the easiest way to accomplish what he wishes to do. Here's why. The 14th Amendment is worded, as are many, fairly specifically. I don't have it right in front of me, but while it does say that any person born in the United States within our jurisdiction is a citizen, it then says that states may not make any law to infringe on the, I believe it's privileges or, it's not rights, it's privileges or something else of citizens. It does not lay the same protection on non-citizens, and the way the wording is stated, well, seems to leave open the possibility for regulating non-citizens when it comes to this amendment. And let's not forget that we've certainly seen regulation passed that limits the scope of amendments like the first, when it comes to incitements and calls to violence and, incitements of riot, of which I mostly support the changes. I don't necessarily think that quote-unquote inciting a riot should be restricted. I think it should be on the individual responsibilities of the members of the crowd to remain calm regardless of what's being said to them. But I do think that direct calls to violence, like, hey, let's go get that guy, or anything close to that, should definitely be regulated. I'm not that much. I'm a free speech, perhaps extremist, but not a free speech absolutist. The Second Amendment, we've certainly seen restrictions to, and others. I mean, even the rights of the press and just rights of protest, all kinds of our rights have been limited, restricted, regulated. It's been proven time and again by our court system that the Constitution is malleable, and that, entirely getting rid of an amendment, that's 2/3 majority, or to actually change the wording of an amendment and have it stand in our Constitution, 2/3 majority. Trump's not going to get it. To pass some sort of regulation using the exact wording of the 14th Amendment, well, I'm not going to read it to you because I don't have it in front of you or memorized, but go take a look. It certainly seems like a possibility with the restrictions we've seen on other amendments. And it doesn't sound, in my opinion, like one of his worst ideas. I know that he's going to be called a racist for it, but people really need to start separating nationalism and racism. I should do a whole video on this subject. I'll touch on it here, though, since I've brought it up, because while Trump may or may not be a racist, what he is, at least in his open, forward persona, is a nationalist and outspokenly not a racist, at least from what he says. And people will argue he's a racist from what he says, but the examples they give are always of nationalism and not race-based nationalism. Like, exactly none of his policies have been racially based. The closest he came to targeting a racial demographic was when he targeted a religion, which is one of the things that he did that I take the most issue with, by the way. Well, anyway, not to rant about Trump or any of that, but I definitely think it's important to realize that whether or not Trump is, a large portion of his supporter base are nationalists, not racists. They care for what's best for this country over what's best for the world or for any individual group of people in this country. They're kind of populists. And populist nationalists can certainly be dangerous and have dangerous rhetoric. So far, I haven't seen too much of it from this group outside of its extreme fringes, which we see on both the left and the right. So, call Trump out on his proposed ban or his proposed change to the birth policy, if you will. Fight it with your own ideas and your own arguments, probably ones for globalism, I would guess, but, I'm sure there will be some humanitarian ones thrown in there, and I'll listen. I'll read, I'll look for your arguments, and you might even change my opinion, since it's been changed quite a lot in the past couple of years. It certainly could be again. But even if you truly believe it's what he is, don't just call Trump a racist. It's not forwarding the dialogue. It's not helping your cause. And quite honestly, the constant chanting of anyone who supports Trump is a racist, even at people who support some of his policies and detract from others and don't necessarily support him, support even one of Trump's policies, and there's groups of people who will call you a racist. That needs to stop. And, go ahead and call them nationalists. And I believe in strong borders and in what's right for our nation to a certain degree. So even I believe in a certain degree of what would be considered nationalism. I might even be growing into more of a nationalist in my older age. But just stop chanting racist. And even if you're against it on a moral level, maybe accept that there is at least an argument, at least a logical, functional, potential reason economically for what Trump is considering. If you take that into consideration when you argue against other people with moral-based objections, your arguments will be stronger. If you actually listen and learn from your opponents and get to know them, you'll get to know how to defeat them. But if you scream racist over the top of everything that they say until you can't even hear them anymore and don't even know what their positions are and can't even properly classify someone who's a nationalist without calling them a racist on top of it, well, let's just say, if that's where you're at, I think you've lost the debate. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, share this video with someone else. More importantly, though, start a discussion. Even if it's not in the comments, go find someone in your life that you disagree with politically but still speak to. Someone close to you, if you have one. If you're not fully echo chambered, and see what their thoughts on the matter are. See if you think they're a racist after you hear them. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Cipher, and this is the Devil's Advocate Debate Club. Have a good night.